ended up being a medical scientist for 9 years.
I made mistakes bringing my son up, and I'm sure all parents do.
You just need to get your face out of the dirt a second. Specialising in neurology and neurodiversity.
I really wanted to try and fix things going forward.
But the healing journey is one step at a time.
I also would add to that the inability to hold relationships in any form.
Was the day that I decided to take a step back from my family. All of the above can be affected just because of childhood trauma.
So I guess we should probably start with talking about why we're doing this and who we are. So maybe let's just start with who you are, like maybe your introduction that you would do on your Pure Soul Guidance about who you are and what you do. And
that's a good point. We haven't actually talked about why are we doing this. We haven't, have we? Are we just chatting a minute?
Yeah, let's just chat.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. I think I'd really like the podcast to be, I mean, we're saying podcast and professional and all that stuff, but I really want it to be real and about people having a chat about what we're dealing with. So let's just chill and take it easy and have a chat like we're just friends, I think.
Okay, perfect.
So I met you on TikTok and I booked your services because you're amazing. Just felt the energy was right. So, but tell me a bit more about what you do on TikTok and why you're doing that on TikTok.
So I seem to have been in medical science for a really long time, and I've been into spirituality for much longer than that. And what seems to have happened is that I got to a point in my life where I just ended up not knowing what I was doing. There was this call of spirituality. There was this call of needing to help people. And everything kind of came tumbling down in my life. And I realized that I needed to create some sort of new future for myself. And so I realized what skills I have and what I need to put together. And it didn't even start like that. I thought, firstly, what is the thing that I could talk about for 2 hours that without any prep that I just love talking about? And that was spirituality and energy and all of those things. And so I thought, wow. Something happened with my job and I lost my job and all of the doors were closed, it seemed, and I had to do something. I had to create something new. And the only thing I knew was spirituality. And all I knew was that the only way I could make any sort of money was get on TikTok and start doing something. And so I just started doing lives and I started talking about what I know. And what came from that was energetics and medical science and trauma. And it developed into this giant train that is now a business, a fully fledged business called Pure Soul Guidance. And it's medical science and spirituality and everything in between. And it is developed into me and my experience of going through so much trauma, being able to explain that with medical science. And then the spirituality on top has just turned into this energetic, gorgeous trauma release thing. And I still don't even know what to call it, but here we are 2 years later, and it's turned into this giant train that I'm just on, and I don't really know what to do with it.
Do you know what? I think Pure Soul Guidance is a perfect name for it. I do, because it's like I've always rejected the word therapy, I guess, because it always made me feel like I was broken, when actually I don't think we're broken. I think we're just misguided in life in general, right? So so I think I get that, I do. So what about your you say medical science, so what is your background in medical science? Let's start there.
So when I was 25, I decided to go back to university and do medical science. It was something that I loved. I loved the body and understanding it. So I've ended up being a medical scientist for 9 years. And I have postgraduate qualifications in medical research, specializing in neurology and neurodiversity. And then I spent like 8 years in pharmaceuticals, managing global clinical trials. And I thought that I loved it and I hated it. And so that's my professional background. And I just realized that I had so much trauma in my personal life that I hadn't dealt with, which turned into a giant health crisis for me. And so I deep dived into researching the relationship between trauma and our bodies and how that actually impacts our bodies, and realized that all of my health issues were because of my trauma. And that's when I started researching that scientifically and getting my understanding of the neurological basis behind that. And then plus the spirituality stuff and energetics and our calling and our path and everything that's involved in that. I've put that together to to deliver this non-therapy therapy, which is
I love that. That's great. Non-therapy therapy. It's amazing. And I must admit, I love the what you're doing with it, because I think when you bring all those things together, that makes a complete human. If you think about it, for me personally, I've always thought that if you're trying to treat one thing, but you're not looking at everything else, what's the point? Because there's no point in trying to fix one hole in a glass when you're leaving the other two holes broken, right?
Yeah. And the more that I talk about it, the more that I realize that what I understand as a medical scientist, and then what I understand as a spiritual Reiki master person, the more that it all goes together, everything fits together. And having worked in clinical trials, it takes like 20 years for a new drug to come down into like GP's offices, for example. And now they're starting to research psychedelic drugs, and they're starting to research sound therapy and all of those things.
Yeah.
So spirituality seems to be just a step ahead of medical science. And as it filters down into our knowledge and our scientific understanding, we're just realizing that everything is science in one whole big thing. And yes, so you're right that we would be missing a trick if we weren't effectively treating both of those sides all at once.
I must admit, I'm fascinated by energy because I've always thought that we've spoken about this before. I've always thought, even from a kid, that everything's about energy. Energy is everything, and everything is energy, right? Energy doesn't disappear. It just transmutes into something else, and therefore that can be a mental energy or a physical energy in whatever fashion that comes. So your Reiki, being a Reiki master, you are, right? Mm-hmm. I need to find out more about that, because I don't really know anything about it, apart from the fact that, as far as I'm aware, it's about holding space for the other person to heal themselves, or something along those lines. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely. The body is something that is naturally reparative of itself. So we are supposed to live in a healthy state. Mm-hmm. And that is what happens with Reiki, is that the Reiki master or the Reiki practitioner, they hold the space energetically, vibrationally, and with their energy, they raise the level to a place where that person then needs to raise and meet them and be part of that healing energy. So it is the person that is having Reiki done on them that in fact heals themselves. The Reiki practitioner just holds that space and directs the energy to the correct place.
I think that's fascinating, because if you take that philosophy into your whole life, effectively what you're doing is saying to the other person in an energetic fashion, take responsibility for yourself.
Yes, 100%.
And I think that goes across all disciplines, like with the mental health, with your physical health. If you don't take personal responsibility, you can't be expected to be fixed, right? Fixed.
Yeah. And again, if you think about it, the doctors aren't fixing us. They're giving us a pill, or they're sewing
plaster.
A wound up to give give the environment of optimum health for our body. So our body repairs itself regardless of whether it's using a pill to do that, or, a suture to weave itself back together. The doctors are just giving it that optimum environment to heal itself.
But I also think, and I don't know if you agree with this, that things like, for instance, let's just take a well-known drug for depression, sertraline, right? I don't think that helps to fix people. I think it masks the symptoms. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I do think that it kind of changes our perception of the reality that's around us to make it more palatable as such. So what it's not doing is treating the underlying causes of the depression. Again, for me, to quote someone like Jim Carrey, which I could probably find a better quote, but it's just a lovely way of him saying it, that when you are depressed, your body is telling you that it needs deep rest.
Yes.
And that's the thing, is that we are so overwhelmed, we're so connected, we're so constantly available all the time. We're just not built for that. Our bodies aren't built for that. Plus trauma, plus stress, plus life, plus jobs and kids and everything else. What are we supposed to do? And so depression tells us, you need to stop, you need to lay down. And so those drugs are just helping us to quiet everything, to allow our brain that space to just stop for a second. But then what we need to do when we're taking those drugs is access other therapies, other holistic ways of helping ourselves and rejuvenating our body and giving it that environment to heal. And then we can start to come off those antidepressants, and then we can be a better, whole, holistic, healthy person after those, so that we use them at crisis point.
Yes. And that's the problem for me, is I've always thought that we never have the opportunity to figure out what's going on with ourselves until it gets to a crisis point. Like when I had to come and find you, I was at a brick wall where I had nowhere else to go apart from not being here, because there was no, in my mind, I had no other option. And I think once you get to that crisis point, it's too late. I think we need to start fixing ourselves. I say the word fixing. I don't like to say the word fixing, but I think most people would understand that the only option is to try and fix yourself before that point. You need to recognize the signs that things are going wrong before that point. So how do we do that?
Yeah. And you said such a wonderful thing there, that it was either all of that or you wanted to get off, basically. And that's where so many people hit the middle of their lives and all of this stuff that is just built up and built up. What was that feeling like for you? Like, because it's not a self-harm kind of thought. It's just I want to get off. Is that how you would describe it?
I want everything to stop. I want everything to stop. I think for me, I have to be careful here because I'm going to end up bawling. So for me, it's trying to keep control of it, isn't it? I think the feeling inside is this, that there's too much noise, there's too much visuals, there's too much information in the back of my brain, there's more stuff coming in, like the inability to deal with what I've already got going on, and someone else is putting more stuff on me. And I think previous to talking to you, I got to this kind of point, I don't know what I'm doing. And then when I realised I needed some help, I was at a brick wall where I thought to myself, I need it all to stop. And the only way I can get everything to stop is to not be on planet Earth. Yeah. Which is weird, because in a silly way, I knew I would never actually do anything to achieve that, but I needed to do that. So I knew that if I didn't do something at that point, there was every chance that if I went any deeper or any darker, that I may do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would call it, I wanted to get off the planet, which I think a lot of people say. I've heard a lot of people say that in life,
Yeah. And it isn't that feeling of wanting to actively do something to you. It is something that is physically happening. Your body is saying, I want everything to stop. Spiritually, it's happening because you feel like there's some sort of path you need to go on, and you need to be in some way healed for that. And so it's coming from about 3 different sides of you hitting this brick wall, and something saying, I need something to change. Otherwise, the only other option my brain can compute is getting off.
Exactly. I think sometimes it's difficult to recognize that, though, don't you think? Because in life at the moment we have a system where we're so indoctrinated into being busy all the time and having your mind on the go and looking after the kids and going to full-time work and doing the dog and making sure the dinner's on time, and like amongst other things, that I don't think people realise that I don't think that's what life is supposed to be about. And I think it pushes you to a point in your head where you're just so overwhelmed, you don't know where to go with it.
Yeah. And so many people come to me at that point, and they say things like, I can't say this. I can't say that I want to get off. I can't say that there's no other option, because they feel like it's kind of a very taboo thing to say, but it's not that they're actively doing things to make that happen. It's just that there's this overwhelmed feeling. And so everything is so medicalized in the way that this presents, like psychologically. And so normally anyone would go down the path of, okay, I need to tell my GP that I don't know what else to do. And and I'm having these thoughts, and yes, but it happens to so many people at some point in their life. And instead of going to the drugs route and the psychiatry route and all of that, if that's available, because sometimes that is not available, what do we do? And we're not taught this other stuff of there's 1,000 other ways that you can deal with this. And so many people feel the same, and it comes from everything you're carrying with you, and you no longer want to carry that with you into your future. And there's your break point.
I think you mentioned the word taboo, and that's actually quite that resonates with me quite a lot at the moment, because Carlos and I were talking yesterday, He had a little bit of an issue, so did I. We have this week, it's been a bit up and down, you know, with things going on, one thing and another. And I think for men, it's especially taboo because they have this, and I don't know whether it's because they're taught that from childhood or whether it's just assumed now because that's the way life's always been, but they have this inability to talk about their mental health, or let's take the word mental health out. They have this inability to talk about being sad or being overwhelmed, or because they're supposed to be manly and, you know, they're not supposed to be able to cry or anything like that. What are your thoughts on that?
People telling them to stop crying, boys don't cry, pull your socks up, get on with it, all of those things that come from those types of parents. It's that little critical voice in the back of your brain, and it's society as a whole. It's ingrained into our culture that men have to be strong, and having emotions is not strong. But there are many cultures out there where emotions are celebrated and asked to come out and to be shown into the world, and that is what makes a man strong. But in our culture, that's not the case. And so men are already on the back foot when it comes to health and mental wellness, in that they can't say, I feel like this. And so I know we're not men and we can't advocate for men, but you know, it's so unfair because they get all of that stuff from just society in general.
How do we help parents to understand what they need to give their little boys for them to develop into a fully fledged manly man without the misinformation of the fact that they're not allowed to be soft sometimes or cry or be upset or something? What have you got any ideas on that? Well, I mean, what would we do about that, do you think?
Do you know what? I think me talking about my son would be a perfect way of doing that. We've encouraged our son to, it's nothing to do with gender fluidity. It's just that, you know, he's allowed to wear what he wants, play with what he wants, do what he wants. And
I love
we've
that.
encouraged that. And that goes against everything that I was brought up with. So when we start talking about narcissistic parents and how, you know, our core beliefs are all formed and all of that, and talking about bloody Inside Out too, and goodness knows what. I think by just us talking about our experiences and that change in the way that I've been parented, and I now parent him, in that he can do whatever he wants, but my father could not cope and was like, you need to wear a Spider-Man outfit.
Right.
So, you know, that kind of stuff. But it's all about core beliefs and forming the right core beliefs when they're young, and supporting those emotions and telling them that it's okay to be emotional. And
I was a bit like that when actually I was bringing Josh up. I didn't really have any things that he wasn't allowed to do, so I did exactly the same thing. I thought, well, if he wants to put nail varnish on, then let him put nail varnish on. You know what I mean? So, but I mean, he obviously he's a more gentle fella anyway. I think he's got a more gentle outlook, so he's probably picked that up off of me because I did most of the parenting. So I'm in a position with Josh where he didn't really have an active father, and I think that's given him a lack of, not a lack of something, but a more feminine view on things. So he's more like you and I, he has I can see this side and that side. Whereas a lot of men that I've met are very, I'm a man. Do you know what I mean?
And my husband as well is, he's had a lot of trauma himself, and he's only just realizing how that's impacted him, and he shuts down his emotions, he backs off, he has to leave the room, and he's had to change all of that and in front of our son and tell him about all of that stuff. You know, I was taught this, my parents did that, and I'm trying not to do that with you, and that's why this is so difficult right now, but I'm changing this for you, and you're teaching me how to be a better parent.
Yeah. Do you know, I'm really proud of my son and his missus, is because they've chosen to parent exactly like that. They allow my grandson to be himself, but they request his attention when it's something really important by saying, okay, I need eyes now, I need eyes. Like, so it's a whole connection thing to discuss what's going on, which I think is amazing. I wish I'd known that when I was a child, when I was a parent, you know, when Josh was a child. So yeah, it's really, really good. I definitely think we need to do something for men specifically. And I've got 2 people on board that are willing to do that. So if you're willing to discuss that sort of stuff with them, that'd be great.
Oh my gosh, yeah, 100%.
Tell me a little, because we have talked insane amounts about my background and my past and my trauma. But what about yours? Because you've told me a little bit, but I don't really know your background.
True.
Apart from what you do to help me.
True. And there was a big deep breath then, because I don't normally share that at all, being in that therapeutic.
You don't have to.
No, it's fine. And I have written it down.
Okay.
So it's fine. Yeah. I think.
Tell me about you.
Yeah, I think I've always been different, and I didn't really know why until I was a lot older and realizing that I was neurodivergent, extremely spiritual, the black sheep of the family, the intelligent one. I think I'm the Tyrion Lannister of my family. I drink and I know things. I just without much thinking.
Excellent.
And I don't know. A lot of people say, like, would I have been different had I have not gone through all of this stuff? And I honestly, no, I don't think so. I don't think all of the stuff that's happened to me could have sent me down an awful path. I don't think that's possible. And so for me, my first memory is my mother's wedding ring being stamped on and thrown in the bin, and my parents divorcing, and it's just an awful scenario. And my mother was, bless her, she was a severe alcoholic, addicted to pharmaceutical drugs, very abusive, very toxic. After my parents split up, all of the domestic violence, the boyfriends, the drinking, the drugs, the homeless people in our house, just so many different things. And, we had a very kind of poor upbringing in that, we were on benefits, we were kind of eating out of bins, those kind of things, stealing coal from next door, lots of what I would think are funny stories, and also people that go through trauma, they know that you deal with it in that way. They are quite funny, but actually when you tell someone that hasn't had trauma, they're like, that's not normal.
Yes, that's fascinating. Actually, sorry, interrupting you just briefly, because the amount of people that I've come across and they will say things like, that's not normal, right? And I'm like, isn't it? Like, this is all I know,
Yeah.
So do carry on.
And just her way of dealing with things was, I know that she went through a load of trauma, and so she dealt with that by drinking and goodness knows what. But then, just myself and my siblings were severely neglected, which ended up in child protection and the courts and everything like that, and being given custody to my grandparents. And then, the other half of my parent team was, this amazing, incredible fighting machine. And he's a military man in his background and very specialized in what he used to do. And I'm extremely proud of him. But the older I got, the more I realized that actually I saw this hero. This is where my emotion comes in, is that he was the biggest, most incredible thing in my life. And I could always say I've never loved anything the way that I loved him. But then as I got older, I realized that all of my drive, all of my need for achievement, all of my need for validation was because he treated me in the way that I suppose we would call narcissistic. And I know that we throw that word around a lot. But being in the field that I am, I now know that, a lot of that is caused by trauma, some possible neurodivergence. There's lots of different facets of why someone has those behaviors. And a lot of the time it comes from where they came from. And so I can't really answer the question and put a label on it. And I don't really want to, out of respect for him. But the way in which he taught me to be and be very kind of submissive, and yes, and none of my decisions were correct, and I had to ask him for everything, that really affected my self-worth and my ability to put boundaries in anywhere, which led to me not feeling safe around men, not feeling like I could in any way say no for fear of them getting angry or, all of that stuff. And so which ended up in some very serious kind of, essay situations and dangerous situations. And it just continued to grow and grow. So not only did I not know who I was, I had all of this trauma, and there's so much more. And, I'm sure at some point we will get onto the adverse childhood experience score, which is only a 10-question survey about what you went through as a child. And there's so much more than 10 questions. But, the answers to that for me are off the scale, which I now totally understand why I've been through so many health problems. And all of that stuff leads to toxic stress, and just your body goes into this shutdown mode. And then I started to get diagnosed with all of these random symptoms, all of these random diagnoses. And I ended up with a list of as long as my arm, including like multiple sclerosis, autoimmune conditions, migraines, headaches, blindness, everything. And I ended up needing brain and spinal surgery because to try and combat some of this stuff that was happening. And now I realize that it's trauma, and it's unprocessed trauma. And I took the time out of my life to process all of that stuff. And guess what? 95% of it has gone away.
Yeah.
And that's now what's brought me to doing this. And all of the medical science and all of the spirituality and then all of the stuff that I've been through all seem to have come to this point in my life where I either choose to use that as a strength and show that to the world, or I don't know what the other option is, because for me there doesn't seem to be another option.
I was literally just about to say the same thing, because with everything that I've been through, I can't ever remember a time where I saw any other option but to power through, because where else could I go?
Yeah.
So I'm totally on board with you with that. It's, there isn't any other option. When you look around for another way out, you're like, oh, there isn't anything. I have to go in this direction. I have to pull my socks up and just get on with it, because what else is there? Especially when you've got a child as well.
And then you start to realize that there's not only just your trauma, there's generational trauma, there's cultural trauma, there's species level trauma. And I fully believe that I was dropped into this family, this surrounding, and that I then had to somehow do something with that and either break out of that or change that or transmute that, whatever language you want to use. And here we are, and it just seems to be getting bigger and bigger. And like I said, I'm on this train that I don't know where it's going, that is just this healing thing and teaching people about this stuff, and also constantly trying to deal with my own stuff and work on that as well, and showing other people how to do that. And it's just this constant journey of continuing to heal at different levels and different layers that are just profound.
Do you know, the funny thing is, when you say that, I know exactly what you mean, because I feel like I'm on this journey and I'm not really sure where I'm going, but I just know I need to keep stepping forward, because like I mentioned to you the other day, and again, it's not about me feeling like I'm amazing or I'm the best thing since sliced bread, because I really don't. I wouldn't be needing therapy if I did. Thanks, babe. However, I've always felt like I'm creating a bow wave with my ship. We're showing people the direction they should be going in, or I'm the lighthouse of truth and light and facts. Or do you know what I mean? I think some people like you and I agree. I think we're born into a family to break generational trauma or break the curse of whatever's been going on, or whatever you want to call it. Because I think when you dial back to the very basics of everything, and we say energy is everything and everything is energy, then we're just being recycled in a way to come back and change things, maybe.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Agreed. And the things that happen just get more profound and just more interlinked and more there's something doing something that we cannot explain. And the more that I look into that, the more I learn, and the more I realize I don't know. But you know, it's things like this business that I've created. I called it Pure Soul Guidance, and I have no idea why. And it wasn't until months later that one of my mods on TikTok, for crying out loud, was like, you do know what a pure soul is, right? And I was like, not really, I thought I made it up. And
do explain. I have no idea. Go on, tell me.
He said that it's someone who has been through so much darkness that they don't get consumed by it. In fact, they come out of that darkness and into that light, and then they turn around and they reach back into the darkness and pull people out of that into their own light.
Oh, I got goosebumps. That's exactly how I feel. Oh my God, I want to cry now.
And so, you know, I want to write a book about that. I want to, you know, I just can't believe that this stuff is dropping into place, and I just go with it now. I just trust it now, because it will eventually make sense to me at some point, just like that.
We had just briefly, and it's kind of off topic, but it's not. So we had an experience. You know, our experience in the Seychelles was less than lovely. And we came back, and like we'd had all this money we'd spent out. There's a reason to this that I'm telling you anyway. When we came back, we had a random amount of money being paid back over and above what we'd spent in Seychelles. And I said to Carlos, like, I don't understand. This money's coming. We've got this extra money. Oh, great, excellent. Then we got a fine for driving up the wrong road in Wanstead somewhere, which I hadn't had any letters about, but it turned up on the doorstep and I'm like, oh, great, 200 quid. Carlos said to me, he said, you realise we got that money because the universe knew that the fine was coming and it wants you to be able to pay it. And I just looked and thought, it will come when you need it. Absolutely. It doesn't matter. So long as if you just let go, the universe will look after you. So long as you talk to the universe and you say, okay, I need some help with this, it will help you. She'll help you. He'll help you, whatever.
And that's the thing about abundance. People think that abundance is only money. That's the only thing that we've been taught. But abundance, the literal definition of abundance is having what you need when you need it, not what you want when you want it.
No. Yeah, exactly. And I'm beginning to realise this deep down in my bones, actually, that you can be happy with very little. And I don't think people realise that. I think you can be happy so long as you've got food and a roof over your head and a bit of love and community around you. You don't need anything else. In reality, you don't need anything else.
Absolutely.
But people don't realise that because we've been pushed into, again, going back to the being busy all the time, earning loads of money, being successful in the way society expects you to be successful. When I class success as being happy, and if you're happy because your family are around and you've got enough beans to go on your toast for the week, what's the problem?
And that word success is just, it's like, and that's where generational trauma comes from, where generational words come from, is that we've been taught over generations and generations and generations that success is the house, the car, the job title, the doctorate, the this, the that, whatever it is, the perfect family. And actually, when we then start dealing with our trauma and dealing with all of these things and those past voices, we then realize that success is peace, joy, and happiness.
Yeah, exactly. Why has it taken me till into my 50s to realise this?
Isn't it? It's so funny.
But I think it goes back to being what you're being taught, right? And I think I actually have a real how would I explain that? I have a real bee in my bonnet, actually, about schooling these days and what we're not taught at school. And that's how to manage our feelings and how to manage the people around us or the other people's feelings around us, and what we're taught how to be successful in society in a monetary value and a stuff value, but not in a personal or an emotional place, you know?
Yeah. And that's why the healing journey and spiritual awakenings are so incredibly devastating and difficult. And it feels like everything explodes because we literally need to reprogram everything we've ever been taught, not only by ourselves and our families, but society completely. And so everything we thought that we were and we knew and that we strive to be becomes this, oh God, I've now got to like reverse all of that and change all of that and find out who I am underneath that and what my new priorities, goals, successes are. And that's so terrifying.
I actually, to put it into a picture format for me, over the last week, I've been working with the things you've been teaching me and looking up stuff online and stuff like that. And I actually think that to make a visual, I'm going to have a go at making it on one of the AI art things. But I think to make a visual of a human being with multiple layers of colour inside them, right? So when you're born as a child, you're born with this, let's just say pure white, right? Pure soul when you're born, because you don't have any of the information apart from maybe the generational DNA information that comes along with the trauma of 12 generations or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think what happens in life is that you're born with this, you know, pure white light, and then you get a little bit of something that someone else throws on top. So you've got this second layer, and then you've got another layer of dark trauma because someone's done something they shouldn't. And by the time you get to our age, you've got these 450 layers inside of you that aren't you, and the one at the bottom that would be the real you. And I think when it comes to trauma and therapy and stuff like that, it's about peeling back the layers of colour to find the real person, which is sometimes really difficult.
Extremely difficult. And that is why it's so heart-wrenching and so soul-destroying, it feels like. Yeah. Because, we're literally peeling away all of those layers and crashing through all of that stuff that made us who we thought we were.
So, with that in mind going forward, how do we help people to rectify those things? What can we do for ourselves in whatever disciplines there are to help ourselves to peel back the layers of the onion and figure out who we really are, in your opinion?
We teach them how to undo all of that stuff. Firstly, it's realizing that it's there. That's the first step. Then it's realizing how it got there, which is who from and what and how. And then how we start to undo that. And that's looking at all of those beliefs that we've formed and built. And I don't know if you have watched Inside Out 2. You have to go and watch it. Like it's incredible. It's in the cinema right now. It's a Disney Pixar film.
Okay.
And it literally tells you about how we form our self-worth based on core beliefs, emotions, and everything we repress and everything we experience. And it's just beautifully done. But it's making sure that those building blocks are correct. So we've got to like literally destroy the house and rebuild it from its foundations up. And that's all core beliefs, self-worth, and self-understanding and being authentically you. And there is a process to that, and it's like a 12-step process. I don't even know how many steps it is, but it's in my brain somewhere. And yeah, I have written that down, and I should share that with you, definitely.
Did you hear my tin go boink behind us? No, you didn't hear the noise? No. Okay, so this tin behind here, I've had, it's like an oil tin, had it for years. It's been sitting in my mum's loft for God knows how long, and we got it out because it's a nice display. But I have to say, I think it's haunted.
Are you kidding?
No, because quite often when we're talking about something in depth, or there's been an angry pocket, or we're laying there trying to enjoy things or talking about something to do with the universe, that frigging tin goes donk. You know, like as if something's expanded or concaved, and the metal sound. Yeah, well, so it does that. So we always go,
so that tin hello. Has to travel with you everywhere. It is your energetic gauge.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Do you know something else I noticed?
I get full body goosebumps.
Sorry,
That's the same thing.
Do you know
full body goosebumps?
Yes, I got that just a minute ago when you were, I can't remember what you were talking about now. Thanks, ADHD. I'll look back at the video. I'll look back at the video, but I got goosebumps. I tend to have cry emotions pop up. So when something's real and I know that it's real, it makes me want to cry. So that's my recognition sign, like your goosebumps, I think.
That's interesting, because I kind of don't want to say the only thing that elicits that in me.
Ugh. Go on, hit me with it.
That's other beings. When like every time I've ever watched anything about aliens or anything like that, I get the same thing.
Oh, really?
But yeah, so that's odd that you say that that's your sign, because that's the only thing that makes me feel that. It's like a tingle behind your nose, isn't it?
Yeah, and your eye, my eyes start to go, and I'm like, oh God, I can feel the emotion welling up inside me, like someone's been really mean to me.
I don't know if this is the space for that just yet, but there we are.
No, absolutely. Always the space with me. Okay, so what sort of things do you want to get across in our podcasts? What are your most important things to tell the world?
That the way in which we are brought up makes us who we are as an adult, whether we like it or not, and we've got to undo all of that. Mm-hmm. That core beliefs are a real thing, and that they are literally the cause of anxiety and depression. And overwhelming emotions or emotional shutdown. And then that trauma will absolutely cause medical diseases, and how we undo that. Also a bit of spirituality thrown in, that once you get rid of all of that, then you can realize who you are. Then you can go, what do I like? Because we don't know what we like when we've been through trauma. We don't know who we are.
Nope.
So once we get to that neutral point, we can then start going, what do I actually want for myself? And then you realize with that spiritual awakening that you then can create whatever hell reality you want, and how to do that. And that leads into then, once you've cleared out all of that old stuff, then you can manifest everything, because it doesn't matter what you want to manifest. You can say it over and over again, however many times you like. But if you've got a fundamental core belief that says I'm not worthy and I don't deserve those things, that manifestation's not going to happen. So we're missing half the battle with that. And you can be as spiritual and incredible as you want, but it takes clearing out all of that old stuff. So that's a lot of stuff in there.
I think for me, what it sounds to me like what you're saying is having faith in yourself. And I think when your core beliefs are not about who you are, and they're more about what everybody else has put on you, and you don't know who you are, then you can't have faith in yourself, because there's a conflict. There's definitely a conflict, because your brain and your body understand that the things that you're doing and the things that you actually want are two different things. Which leads me into, I figured out what the visions were I were having when we were doing that thingy that day, because I kept thinking to myself, I feel very blocked here. Like I really wanted to get into it like I normally do with you. And it was almost like there was this concrete wall dropped in front of me. And so what I was seeing was, and I realise now, is that it was different aspects of myself that I was talking to. So the concrete block with the long hair was the Indian part of myself, stuck in this position like this, because that's what I was seeing with all the long hair down the back, which told me it was the Indian, native Indian. The little hand was little me that I was holding. Oh, God.
Wow.
Was little me. So, hang on, gather myself a little bit. So the little hand was little me who was holding. And the reason I felt the hand growing up was because she was saying, I've been stuck here so long. And sorry, excuse me a second.
This is going to be a common occurrence for both of us.
I think so, yeah. But I think it's good for people to see the reality of things. I really do. Thank you. So, yeah.
Missed it.
No, I didn't.
No, she didn't. She saw right up your nostrils.
Oh, nice. Is there a booger?
No boogers, no. You've got a bat in the cave. Bats in the cave. Okay, let's go back to that. So I realised that the concrete lady with who was the native Indian, she was laying. It was almost like she was laying in a concrete block, just stuck. And I couldn't get her to look at me. She didn't feel like she was really there. It was almost like a concrete version of a native Indian lady. The little hand that I was holding was little me. And when you said, I said, it feels like the hand's getting bigger. And now I realise, because I was growing up with her as I was talking with you, and she was saying, I'm growing up here in this rigid position and I want to be free. I want to be free. And that's why I said she wants to be free. And you said about going outside, and I stood outside, but the concrete lady was still inside. Yeah. So I realised that what was happening was I was being told that I have to dig up the concrete. I have to melt it. I need to let her go and let her just do what she needs to do. And that's why we're here today. Because for all of my life, I have resisted and refused to put myself in front of others in a way that they'll see me, that they'll actually see me.
And literally everything you've just said, energetic realignment, taking care of your inner child, getting rid of that block and growing. That's trauma release, my darling. That's what we need to do.
Yay. Which is, I actually quite like the fact that although at the time I thought to myself, okay, this I can't work with this. I don't know what's going on here. Now I realise this is my bounding board. It's my rebound board. The concrete lady, the little hand, the windmill, the grinding, the outside free space that I could see for miles and miles, and it made me so happy. Is my point of push off.
Yeah, and this incredible energy coming in, which was coming in for you in that vision. That's yours.
Yes. And so I'm much happier this week. If a little stressed this morning. Have you got anything specific that you want to talk about, as in like a specific subject that's close to your heart? I know you've mentioned about spirituality and the aliens and things like that, but which is something I really want to talk to you about. But have you got anything that you want to get across today that we haven't got out yet, or like what do you want to do with your business going forward? What would you hope for the podcast, for instance? What's it going to give us or you?
I think overall, it's truly about what we're taught. It's reality. It's what reality is what we're taught that we think reality is, and what we actually then find we can do and create and build. And I feel like my whole journey has been this past old reality. And, you know, whatever language you use, that 3D reality of corporate achievement, success, and family and houses and cars and all of that, that's so far away from me now. It feels like a dream. To this place that I've now come to in my life, where I live in Thailand. I have created my own business. I'm the spiritual whatever I am. And everything is just happening that I want to happen in its own good time, perfect timing. But it's these two lives, these two realities that sometimes intersect and other times are so different and so far away from each other that I have no understanding of how they even got there. But I've somehow passed through this gate of corporate old society achievement. I think it's these two different lives that when you, I don't even know, I can't explain the process and what it is. It seems to be trauma, some sort of neurodivergent diagnosis, a spiritual awakening, and freedom. And it goes in that order. The neurodivergent diagnosis might come before the spiritual awakening or the other way around, but that seems to be the process for so many people around the world right now. And they're going from this old reality to this new reality, and everyone is just in awe and excited, and they feel like they can do whatever they want, and all of the old stuff doesn't matter anymore, and it feels like a dream that you can't even see anymore. All of that energy, all of that consciousness, it's changing.
Yes, I think so. Do you think, this is really random, probably not for you, I'm sure you'll probably go, So knowing what we know about the mycelium network, and bringing this back into the Schumann resonance, etc., the mycelium network works underground across the planet in billions and trillions and gazillions of little networks, and talking to trees and plants and things like that. Do you think that the Schumann resonance could be partly that too? Because if they're measuring the resonance of the planet, that would be everything underground, right? And we start from there.
The way in which I would answer that is that what you're talking about is consciousness. Yes. Everything has consciousness. A rock, a leaf, wherever however you may explain that a tree may have a different consciousness to a human. Of course they do. And they're aware of many different things, but that whole network, that whole thing is just the highway in which everything connects and communicates and feels each other. And we have that same structure within our bodies, and it's only just been discovered in the last kind of 10 years or so. But, you know, people used to think, you know, how does one thing get to another part of the body? How does cancer spread? All of those things. And we've worked out that there's this whole interconnecting system between all of our tissues. And so what we're talking about is that on a giant level of a mycelium network across the earth.
Yes. Yeah. So if everything's connected, it goes back to the energy again. Energy is everything and everything's energy. And so therefore it must all be communicating all at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Wow, fascinating. I wonder if more people understood that less people would want to go out and buy stuff.
Yeah, that's the plan and the goal. And, you know, it's not our goal to change anyone's minds or make them believe this stuff. It's not that. It's just, it is, that understanding, that awareness of something bigger than you, of that you might have a hand in something that is bigger than you. And just by the way that you think and by how much trauma is left inside your brain, that you could profoundly change other people.
I think just sometimes with one conversation, you can change someone's mind about something. I mean, for instance, let's take our sessions as a port, you know, a place to start, is that, you know, there's been a couple of times when you've just said one sentence and I've gone, almost like my computer fell over, and I've thought, okay, that's so simple. Why did I not know that?
And to me, that sentence will have just been something I heard that sounds really not profound, whatever the opposite of not profound is.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying that to you, and it's unlocked something in you that's changed your belief, your behaviors, everything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I also think that when you allow things out of yourself, like for instance, for me, writing, my thought process coming out in writing works for me because it allows things out from somewhere deep down inside me that I wouldn't normally think until I put myself in a position where I have to think about it. And I think quite a lot of the time, conversations are a form of expelling stuff, you know. And I think a lot of people don't understand that therapy, or soul guidance, as we're calling it, is just that. You're expelling the stuff that you don't need anymore, you know?
Yeah. And with those words come connected emotions. And in many forms of therapy, when you start to get emotional, when it starts to come up, when it feels like you're becoming overwhelmed, it's dampened back down. And I know there are reasons for that, to stop people going into panic attacks and things like that. But correctly managed in the right way, your body then connects to that emotion and it feels it and it releases it from every part of your body and every cell that's been holding this stuff. So sometimes dampening it down isn't the answer. We have to expel it and get it out. And then there's the extra stuff of, words are consciousness, words are energy, words are thoughts. And so when you put something out into the universe, it can change everything.
You know, it's a really good point to make, because I've always been a great believer in, I pride myself on the fact that I think about everything before I say it, because I'm always conscious that something I could say, or the way I say it, can hurt people. And I'm not perfect, I get that, you know, especially when you're close with someone and you, like, for instance, Carlos and I have an upset, and I might be a bit harsh in the way I say it because I'm very factual because of, you know, neurodivergence or whatever, or maybe that's just my personality, who knows. And sometimes he'll say to me things like, I don't know, oh, that was really hurtful. And in my head, I'm like, well, it's just basic facts. But I try to only say things that aren't going to hurt people. And I think a lot of people forget that. They forget that because of the way they think, that the words they're using may or may not hurt somebody else, but it doesn't hurt them. Do you see what I mean? And I think being self-aware, like you mentioned, is one of the biggest things that we should perhaps try and help people to learn, is being self-aware, because you see so much more when you start taking personal responsibility and aware of the things you're actually doing, instead of just getting up and roboting through the day, you know?
Yeah. And there are moments in my life that I can honestly pinpoint where I know I've said something that has like awfully hurt someone. And it's because it came from a place of a recorded thing. It didn't come from, you know, it came from something I learned that someone had told me. And I'm not saying that I'm not, you know, in any way responsible for those things I said, because I said them, but they are not reflective of the person that I am. And so now I try and speak completely from my heart and not from something that someone has taught me or someone has put into my brain. And it's very easy to play those recorded messages, if you like, that our brain has learned. But if you try and do everything from a compassionate place, a heart space place, then I think you're on the right track. And just being self-aware that sometimes, you know, and also some people are going to receive things that is their stuff that they're going to hear differently than how you said it, because it triggers something within them that causes upset or anger or whatever. So we can't always control the narrative, and that's where we go down the rabbit hole of, you know, just being aware of everything, and it just becomes so overwhelming.
It's exhausting, right? It's exhausting. Actually,
one
of the things I realized lately is that I used to avoid talking about things, and like quite actively so. You know, we'd get to a point in our conversation or heated discussion, as we call them, that I would just walk away because I didn't know where else to go with it. And I'd been taught, my narrative, my programming was that if you can't handle something, slam the door and walk away, because that's what my parents do, or specifically my mother. She actually looks at you and then turns around and walks away. So I learned that, and I think we learn these things from people around us, specific parents or guardians generally, but sometimes friendship groups, and they're not productive for us. They're not productive.
No.
They're not productive going forward for our children. They're not productive for our family unit. So I think they're one of the things that we need to help people get out of, I think.
100%.
For sure. I've got some questions for you, sort of, where perhaps you can give me an idea on how you deal with them, or what your thoughts are on them anyway. So the first one is, what happens when a child's needs are not met, and how does that transfer into adulthood?
What a fabulous question. And it's the golden question, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
When a child's needs aren't met in childhood, because of whether it's a toxic family or a narcissistic parent or caregiver, there is something that then happens when that child communicates their needs. So it's either that they are met with no, or you can't have that, or stop asking for that, or whatever it is that is followed up with. That is then carried into adulthood. Our brain has learned that when we communicate our needs, that we're going to get met with that same problem. So either someone's going to get angry, or they're going to say our needs aren't important, or we need to stop being so needy.
Yeah.
So we cannot communicate those needs. And in fact, it causes a fear response in us. It causes a fight or flight response sometimes in people.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is that we then start to get anxiety when we have needs, and when we need to communicate those needs and how we're going to do that. And it just turns into this big, awful thing that it doesn't need to be.
So what, just give me an example, if you can think of one, of what that looks like in adulthood. So you're saying, for instance, anxiety in adulthood. Do children have anxiety? I don't even know.
Yes.
Would we have what they class as anxiety?
Yes, but children do have anxiety, very much so,
mm-hmm.
but they may not be able to articulate it or communicate it or process it. So they may just internalize it, or it may come out in a different way. So, but yes, children absolutely have anxiety.
So, for instance, if I shut myself in my room and read a book to avoid contact with everybody in the house, would be considered as some form of anxiety management, right?
Yes, that would be a coping mechanism for your anxiety.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't do that in adulthood, but I do notice that I get quite feisty, is what I would call it. And I think what's happened over time for me specifically, and correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but I think what's happened is, because I don't have the ability to shut myself in a room and hide away anymore because I have to be an adult, boring. I think what happens for me now is actually I have my fists up all the time, or used to.
Right.
So I'm coming out of a boxing ring, go away, and I think maybe that for me is what happened in adulthood rather than childhood. But do you see other things for instance, in your therapy sessions? Do you see people coping in other ways? What would be the transference into adulthood for other people, do you think?
It will manifest in very simple ways. For example, if your boss comes in one day and says, can you do these 10 things, please, which weren't part of your job description, instead of saying, they're not part of my job description, I need some extra space or time to do those, that would be communicating your needs.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were taught not to communicate your needs because either you're going to be told off, or God forbid there would be violence or anger, then you won't push back to your boss and say, I need some extra time, or I need some reallocation of these tasks. And what happens is some people will get angry at their boss immediately for asking that, or they will go away and they will speak to their colleagues and get angry, or they will hold it all in and wait until they go home. Then they will have an emotional meltdown, or they will hold it in and hold it in and hold it in. And I'm this person until I burn out.
Same.
Until I cannot give anymore.
Yes.
And so it looks very different for everybody. But what that turns into as an adult is not having any boundaries.
Right. Okay. And that causes a multitude of problems, as is. I mean, as we've spoken about, things like SA and, DV or whatever. So, yeah, interesting. Okay, cool. So that's something we can look at as well. So tell me your thoughts on love languages in adulthood and how that affects relationships. So, for instance, let me give you an example. For men, they want to build something for their wife, and maybe that's how they show their love. They want to do the handiwork or the heavy lifting, and the women wash the clothes, or they cook nice meals. I've cooked you a lovely dinner tonight, darling, and I've put like 3 hours of effort in here. And then the man may go, oh, well, it's just food, like whatever, and of course there's a mishap of emotions then, because the wife spent 3 hours and the man just eats it in 10 seconds, gets up and goes and watches the TV. So that would be a problem, right?
So what's your love language?
I'm still struggling to figure those things out, because I'm really not sure who I am. I think I've spent so long pretending to be someone else that I don't think I really know. I think acts of service are probably my thing. Yeah, helping others. Helping others is what I've always wanted to do, and I think that comes from, that's the way I show my love for people, is by, actually, I think a lot of people mistake my love language for control, or for being a bit of a big head. I think because I've been called a know-it-all by my sister a few times, and other people, actually, not many, but some. And I think they see it as me being a know-it-all, when actually what I'm trying to do is use the information I have to better their lives for them, or to help them be happier.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Understanding each other's love language, I think, is one of the most important parts of a relationship, because those love languages can be developed from things that we didn't have and we craved as a child, or the only things that we did have, and that's what love is to us. And so for me, things like, I don't want to be this person that my love language is gifts, because immediately we think that that's materialistic in some way. But actually, for me, having somebody create a surprise birthday party for me, because I'm such a control freak because of the trauma, that, you know, to get something past me is actually really damn difficult. So what that means is, for me, that someone not only thought about me, but then decided what they think I would like, which requires them to know things about me and to do all of those things. That, to me, is the most incredible process, that someone's created a surprise party for you and thought about everything that you want and everything that you wanted to receive. But then also, it's really important to make sure that those love languages are honored in both parts of the relationship, because you're right, if you don't know someone else's love language and one person is doing something that they think is love and the other person doesn't receive love in that way, then you just start to get this miscommunication and this what do you call it, just resentment starts to build if you're not careful, because people aren't meeting each other's emotional needs.
Exactly. I think it creates a disconnect between the couple. And if I'm honest, you know, Carlos and I've worked on this a few times. We've worked on it, I say, we've talked about it, because, you know, sometimes he's doing something that he thinks is what I want, but he hasn't asked me, and that's not what I wanted. And then we end up in this place where well, he's like, well, I was doing that for you, I was trying to be nice for you, and I'm like, well, I didn't need that right now. So yeah, I think it causes a disconnect. And I think actually what we've decided recently is that if we need something or we want something, we're going to ask for it, and we're going to say, okay, this is what I need today to feel happy, can you help me with that? If not, okay, that's fine, we'll move on and do something else. Do you know what I mean? So because obviously sometimes you're both in a bit of an emotional place where you can't manage it, and then we just need to understand that today is not the day. But it's about asking and communication. I think communication is key here, for sure.
Absolutely.
So let's have a quick scoot onto this one. So
these are good questions.
Well, I hope so, because I think it gets us talking, and then, like I say, we can make a full episode about them potentially. So, okay, my next one here. What do you think are the biggest problems that come from childhood trauma? What's the fallout of childhood trauma, do you think?
I really do think that most people don't even realize what trauma is, firstly. They may not understand that so many different things can be trauma. And so many people come to me saying, I had a great childhood, it was normal. And then we start to talk and we start to pick at it, and we realize that their childhood was far from normal. So it's firstly understanding what you went through. And if something's not really affecting you, or you think it's not affecting you, you're not going to go and look at that stuff. But it's when you get to this place in adulthood where everything stops and you're angry and you're emotional, or you're shut down, or you're whatever that looks like for you, it's then looking at what you did actually go through and realizing how profound of an impact that would have on you. It will change everything about you. You won't know who you are, what you like, what you want to do, what success means to you. You won't know. It will affect your relationships, your career, your friendship groups, the way you live, where you live. Every facet of your being will be affected by childhood trauma in some way, until you realize exactly how it can affect you and what the fallout is. And the fallout will be things like being in toxic relationships, being in a career that you don't want and you didn't even like in the first place, but you were told that you needed to do, being underneath a giant mortgage because you were told that having a mansion in the Cotswolds was the best thing for you. And just all of those things, financial burdens, unhappiness, depression, anxiety, burnout, so many things, medical issues, all of the above can be affected just because of childhood trauma.
Yeah. I also would add to that the inability to hold relationships in any form, because I think family relationships fall apart. Partners fall apart because they don't know how to communicate with each other, etc. So yeah, definitely think that's the thing.
If you don't know what a healthy relationship looks like, how are you supposed to build one as an adult? How are you supposed to teach another person how to be a human being when you weren't taught anything?
So that answers the question I put to you earlier, is why has it taken me till I'm 50 something to figure this stuff out, right? Because I wasn't taught that in the first place.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things that I think has caused me a lot of my issues in my life is actually not something that happened to me, but it's something that happened in my family. And I think a lot of people forget that things that happen to your parents or in the family life situation can quite often affect you quite dramatically, and you don't realise it until it's too late. So let me see if I can think about how to phrase this question. So let me explain where I'm going with this. So as you know, my nan and her sister both committed suicide, right?
Yeah.
That left my mum a broken child. It's very clear that left her broken. If you look at the photo that I sent you, it's a little note on there that she wrote to her mum, "We're still so sad about why you left us," or something like that. I can't quite remember what it says now. What would be your advice to people that are suffering something as dreadful as someone unaliving themselves? What would be your what would be your suggestion for them to do the best for themselves in that situation? Where would they start? How would they start to fix themselves, do you think?
When something giant like that happens in a family, whether it's suicide, divorce, someone going to prison, having an alcoholic parent, these things go untalked about. Pain demands to be felt by somebody, and it will end up destroying families until somebody is willing to look at it and change it and talk about it and process it. And that's the problem. We cannot leave this elephant in the room. And when people that are generations past have been through traumas and they cannot process it, they cannot talk about their emotions, it becomes this giant elephant in the room that nobody seems to talk about. And it's just left in the background there. But it will profoundly affect each generation that goes along if we leave it in the corner of the room and we don't talk about it. When these things happen within families, we as human beings know that it has to be talked about. Are you okay? No, I'm not. Okay, let's go and see a therapist. Let's go and deal with that. Let's go and feel that pain and get that out of our bodies. We have to process trauma. It doesn't matter how painful it is, how awful it is, we have to. And we have to also honor those people that went through those traumas. And if we don't do that, it will just end up being silenced, and someone of the following generation will have to deal with that silence.
Yeah, I think that's me, unfortunately, and I think that's caused an awful lot of pain because I've never been able to talk to my mum. I think because she shuts down because of what's gone on in her childhood. Yeah, she shuts down, and you're right, people don't talk about it. So I think the conclusion to that is things need to be talked about. Everything needs to be talked about. If it's causing you pain or upset or discomfort in any fashion, that they have to be addressed, whether it's with a family member or a friend or a therapist or even on our channel. Because maybe that's what we're here to do, to help people fix themselves, take responsibility for those things.
Yeah, it's bravely breaking that cycle. You have to. Someone has to do it. And unfortunately, that fell on us.
It did. Actually, it's one of the things I'm proudest of most in my life is the day that I walked across to my neighbour and said, take me to the hospital, because if you don't, I'm no longer going to be here. And I think that was the point in my life it was a turning point. I think it was the point where I decided that I can't live like this anymore. And I've never seen so much shock on one human's face, actually, as my neighbour. She went, "I'm just getting my keys," as she walked up the hallway, which was really lovely.
And there's only a certain type of person who can do that too. And many people would panic in that situation or not do the right thing or whatever it is.
Yeah. I was very grateful for that moment. Thank you very much, Jane, if you ever watch this, because I think you saved my life that day.
For me, that day was the day that I decided to take a step back from my family, realizing that so much had gone on, so much had happened, that there was no way that I could continue my life until I'd started to heal some of that and started to process and talk about some of that instead of leaving it in the corner and ignoring it. It's not possible. And I was not going to give that to my son to deal with.
Yes, this is one of my biggest things, that I really wanted to try and fix things going forward, or change things. Let's take the word fix out, but change things for the future generations, because obviously with the grandson now, I want everything to be as much better. I want things, how do I say that? Oh my God, my brains fell over. I'd like things to be better for my grandson going forward, for my son, because I made mistakes bringing my son up, and I'm sure all parents do. Nobody's perfect, are they? But definitely want things to be much better for Spencer going forward. So, yeah. Have you got anything that you want to say or to finish? Like, is there anything you want to say to finish this part of our podcast? What would your leaving thoughts be?
I know that the healing journey is scary. And sometimes when you are in that moment that you've just described, where I need to go to the hospital, otherwise I'm not going to be okay. In that moment, you feel like you are face down in the ground, and that any kind of healing journey is this giant mountain that you need to climb. It's absolutely not. It is the next step, and the next step is putting your fingers in the dirt and pulling, getting your face off of the ground. Then the next step is getting to your knees, and so on and so forth. You don't need to climb the mountain, you just need to get your face out of the dirt a second. And that act is it takes the most strength that you could possibly muster, because sometimes we don't have that strength left. We don't, but we have to find it from deep down somewhere. But the healing journey is one step at a time. It's whenever you want to start doing it, or the next step you want to take, however long that takes, it's okay. But the healing journey doesn't have to be terrifying. Of course, it's going to be painful at times, but getting yourself off the ground is the hardest bit.
Yes, I agree. And I think that's a fabulous place to end it. I really do, because I think, no, I do. I think it's really important for people to know that. And so for anybody watching, with that in mind, we're going to have, obviously we're going to be ongoing with these podcasts, but take our hand, we're here to help. See you next time.